Welcome back to Ultimate Spider-Man Saturdays. This is where we go over the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline volume by volume, allowing you to catch up entirely on one of the most incredible Spider-Man storylines that existed during the periods of Spider-Man storylines. Today we're going to be covering Volume 9. Now, in the last video, Peter attempted to stop the cat burglar known as Black Cat one night as she stole something belonging to the Kingpin. But after a brief fight, Black Cat managed to escape with Kingpin's stone tablet. After learning the truth about Black Cat's past, Peter helped her fight off Kingpin and Electro, only to have her disappear once again. While everything for Peter seems to have remained calm, S.H.I.E.L.D. wasted no time in gathering up the villains who have taken part in the unauthorized genetic mutations. In their custody is now Otto Octavius, also known as Doc Ock, Max Dillon, also known as Electro, Flint Marko, known as the Sandman, and Norman Osborn, known as the Green Goblin. Since their capture, Hank Pym has been working on these four in an attempt to rehabilitate them, allowing them to try and do some good for once. Outside, though, Agent Sharon Carter escorts Kraven the Hunter to containment, explaining to him that the device around his neck will stabilize genetics if he tries to do anything. Not smart. Kraven shouts, asking if they know who he is. He is Kraven! His face begins to change, and he yells as his teeth start to form fangs, and Sharon tells the guards to hit the collar. Suddenly, the collar around Kraven's neck starts to emit electricity, stunning and forcing him to the ground. Sharon goes on telling him, like she was saying, the collar will forcibly stabilize his genetic structure, and as he can see, it's not a pleasant experience. One thing he should know, though, is that the collar does match his strength, so the harder that he resists it, it is possible that it will fry his brain. Back in the holding cells, the guards toss Kraven in, and Max says that he knows that guy. Is he really a mutant? Sharon tells him no, they keep the mutant terrorists on a whole nother slice of heaven. This is the place for those cute little genetic anomalies, so sleep tight. As Sharon leaves, Kraven slowly starts to wake back up, and Max calls out that, by the way, his show is really sucky. Kraven screams as he runs towards the barrier and he's electrocuted, and Max just sits in his cell laughing. Down the hall, Norman sits in his cell asking, why would they bring all 6 of them together? Otto asks him, what does he mean by 6? There's only 5 of them here. And Norman leans back, telling him no, there will be 6. The next day, the captives are all brought out, and Hank tries to speak with them all again, mainly Norman, since he's been the most silent out of all of them. Hank asks what is it that made him do all of this. He had everything that he could ever want. A wife, a child, millions of dollars, his own business, legendary scientific acumen. And Norman laughs, telling him, I was just doing what Nick Fury tells me to do. They wanted the Oz formula, the miracle that made me and Otto the way that we are. Hank says, actually, we already have the formula. That and everything that you own was seized the day that you were taken into custody. As Hank goes on, Norman gets angry, and his skin starts to change, and Norman changes into the Green Goblin, breaking out of his restraints. But seconds later, Hank's giant hand grabs him and slams him down to the ground. Hank looks back at the other captives and tells them that at least they know the system works. 6 weeks later, Sharon escorts Norman back to his cell after being released from medical and asks everyone to guess who's back and better than ever. And by better, she means completely sedated out of his mind. Max shouts that he doesn't feel very comfortable having Norman around them, and Sharon tells him to be quiet or she'll stick them both in the same cell. Max tells her fine, at least take her top off for them. Sharon smiles, telling him sure, and she starts to unbutton her shirt as Max's eyes light up. Sharon stops, telling him psych, and Max grits his teeth, telling her that she will be the first. Otto looks over at Norman's cell, and as the two lock eyes, Otto calls out that he would like to talk to Hank, please. He wants to talk. A short while later, Otto stands before Hank and his team, telling him that he just wants to help after seeing what Norman has done to himself. He wants to contribute. He's a man of science, not some monster, so please let him help. Hank stares at him for a moment and says that he'll get back to him on that. And a few days later, Hank walks Otto into their research facility, and Otto asks what is the overall focus that they are trying to achieve here. Hank tells him that he may know. The next war will most likely be fought genetically, so they're working on ways to stay ahead of that. Otto looks around and says that it's really good to be back in the lab. And another researcher says that she knows that this might be a bit too soon, but they have a surprise for him. Otto sees the table with his mechanical arms, and the researcher says that those arms have revolutionized high-risk lab working. But as Otto stares at him, he says that it's strange being a man of science, but he wonders if his connection to them is more of a mental connection. Like a connection, not just physical. Maybe the explosion that grafted it to him was in fact a method of mentally unlocking his control over them. Otto continues to talk, but soon soon no one responds. He then looks around, telling them that they'll just have to take his word for it. But the arms are already out, stabbing everyone in the chest. Back over in the holding cells, the lights go out and everyone starts to walk out of their cells, wondering what's going on. Flint Marco asks if this means that they can use their powers, and Max sparks his finger, telling him there's only one way to find out. He starts to emit electricity and he fires a blast, hitting Norman's collar. Norman falls to his knees, groaning, and a moment later he starts to change into the Green Goblin. Once everyone's collars are disabled, Otto knocks down the door and Norman asks him if he's the one who did this. Otto tells him that it's called telling them what they want to hear, and what he's become is truly magnificent. Norman tells him that they are now even, so it's time for him to get his boy and destroy Nick Fury. And Otto asks, where do they keep your son Harry? Norman asks him, what is he talking about? His boy's name is Peter. All at once, the Ultimates hear their communicators going off, and everyone rushes over to the now destroyed containment facility. Tony arrives in the Iron Man suit and begins to scan the place for signs of life. After a quick glance, Tony says that there are 3 signals, and then he asks how many people are in the facility. Nick's eyes go wide as he tells him that there were 38 people here. Tony hurries over to the 3 signals and says that he found Hank. He's alive, but barely. A short while later, Nick gathers everyone at the S.H.I.E.L.D. base of Triskelon and begins to go over the footage of the outbreak. He explains to everyone that at the present moment, they are unable to locate any of the captives. The only way to pinpoint them is if they power up again. Dramatically changing their genetic structure would set off an alarm. Nick goes on telling everyone that it's possible that they need to watch out for any past relationships that these people had, or past grudges. And as Nick thinks about it, he realizes that Norman did have a grudge against Peter Parker. Not long after that, Peter sits in his school when a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent pulls him out of class. As the two walk down the hallway, Peter asks him who he is, and he explains that he is Agent Clay Quartermain from S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury had orders to bring him in. Peter then asks, how does he know that he's with S.H.I.E.L.D.? Does he have some kind of identification? Clay holds out his watch, and on the screen, Nick tells him to get his tights and get his butt over there. A short while later, over at the base, Nick brings Peter into the control room and tells everyone that this is Spider-Man. Tony looks at him asking, did he pull him out of time or something? He's kind of young. And Nick shouts, no, this is really him. Before they can get all high and mighty, he would like to point out that he has single-handedly beaten the crap out of everyone who has escaped, and the entire S.H.I.E.L.D. organization couldn't do that. Peter then asks, wait, escaped? Who? And Nick tells him, all of them. Peter shouts that he's got to warn Aunt May, but Nick tells him that he's got that covered. He has agents watching over both May and a Mary Jane. While everyone begins to prepare themselves, Peter says that he needs to call Mary Jane. Norman threatened her, so Nick grabs the phone from Peter and shouts that he just lost 35 people today. That's more than he's ever lost since he took this job. Now, if he won't listen to them, he will ship his butt back to Queens and let him fend for himself. The room falls silent as everyone looks, and Peter says that he doesn't understand. What do they think they're going to do? As Nick looks at the monitor with Norman on it, he says that they'll find out soon enough. Over in the White House, Mr. Stone, the chief of staff, receives word from his secretary that Norman Osborn is on the line for him. Stone grabs the phone and says that this is Stone, and then he hangs up the phone. He walks into the president's office and says that they have a serious situation with Nick Fury. A few hours later, Nick sits in the Oval Office while the president yells, asking how is it that criminals that he didn't even know about ended up calling the White House. Not only does Norman Osborn want $100 million, but he also wants his company back, his son, and amnesty for himself and a few others, along with the arrest of Nick Fury or else. Nick Fury asks him what is the what else, and the president goes back to shouting that he's threatening to expose the highly confidential organization for illegally detaining, or they will release that information worldwide. He goes on stating how there was a little concentration camp for supervillains behind his back, and now that they were all locked up without any sort of trial or due process, they've also escaped. Nick tries to explain, but the president cuts him off, shouting that he has until tonight to get this fixed. Now get out. As Nick Fury walks out of the office, his phone goes off, and when he answers, Norman says that he hopes that he will enjoy prison more than he did. A little while later, Nick heads back over to the base to get everyone ready to move out, and as he suits up, one of the operators shouts that they're currently being hacked. Everyone runs over to the computers, and Nick shouts for everyone to shut down the systems, and then the power goes out. Everyone stands still, and Peter begins to feel his spider sense going off. Just then, all of the lights begin to pop, and electricity shoots out, shocking most of the people. Max then floats down, telling everyone that he hopes they all like it like that. Any remaining agents open fire on Max, but the bullets phase through him, and he says that isn't going to work as well as they'd hoped. Suddenly, a rush of wind shoots by as sand begins to cloud everyone's vision. Peter tries to web up Max, but Flint forms a hammer of sand and cracks Peter in the head as he falls. Norman rips off the roof and jumps down, pinning Peter to the ground, and he smiles, telling him, "My boy." A little while later, Peter sits in a chair, beginning to hear the voices of Norman and Otto talking. When he opens his eyes, Norman looks down at him, telling him, "There's my boy." Peter begins to look around and sees Kraven changing shape, and he punches him, shouting, "He's just a kid!" Otto grabs Kraven by the neck with a mechanical arm and slams him into a wall, and Otto tells him to be still. Norman then says, obviously Kraven is the weakest of us, so he'll do best to keep quiet and behave. Kraven wipes the blood from his mouth, telling him, yeah, okay. Otto then picks Peter back up and sits him down, and Peter asks, why do you keep calling me your boy? Norman leans down, telling him that it's because he is his greatest creation. If it wasn't for him and Otto, he wouldn't be Spider-Man. Norman then goes on, telling him that together they are all victims of Nick Fury here, and now you are one of us, so let's all make history. Peter breaks free from the chair, shouting for him to shut up, and he jumps onto the wall. He then says that if he thinks for a second that he's going to help him, but Norman then holds out his arm, stopping him, telling him, Aunt May will die tonight, and if you still can't behave, then it will be Mary Jane, and then her family. As Norman keeps listing off things, Peter tells him, fine, okay, just leave Aunt May alone. Back over at the White House, Stone gets another call from Norman, and he asks, how's everything working out? Stone says that he's sorry, but the White House just doesn't work like that. He can't cough up $100 million. Norman cuts him off, telling him, well, that's really too bad. And then he hangs up. The president then asks everyone if they got a hit on his location, and the lights go out. Suddenly, electricity shoots out of all of the electrical devices, and then there's a loud boom coming from outside. Soldiers stationed outside begin firing towards the explosion, and then another wave of electricity shoots out, frying them all. From the smoke and the fire, Norman, along with Peter, steps out, stating that this will do. As everyone walks towards the White House, they all start to hear a loud humming. When they look up, they see the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier flying by. Captain America steps up and points to Norman, telling him, you're trespassing. Without even responding, Norman and the rest of them clash with the Ultimates, and all Peter can do is stand there and watch. Norman grabs him and puts him in front of Captain, telling him to do something useful. As Peter nervously pulls his arm back to swing, Captain America asks, what are you doing? Peter stutters, telling him that he has to, or Aunt May's going to. Peter then grabs onto Captain America and he tells him, Norman won't. We have her up in the helicarrier. While the two of them struggle, pushing each other back, Peter asks, you promise? You swear you have her? And Captain America looks at him and says, kid. Peter lets go and he looks back to Norman, calling him out. Norman shouts that he told him to, but before he can finish, Peter cracks him across his goblin face. He then jumps on top of him, shouting that he's sick of having him in his life, and then one of Otto's mechanical arms grabs and throws him. Peter's body shoots through the field, crashing into the White House. As Peter gets back up, he says, so this is the Oval Office, huh? Back outside while the fighting continues, Janet flies towards Otto and straight into his mouth. A few seconds later, Otto begins to gag and he falls to the ground. Janet then crawls out, stating that this will make her the first person in history to be totally covered in gingivitis. Elsewhere, Flint Marko beats down on Tony in the Iron Man suit while Tony radios in that he could really use the genetic sequence for Sandman right about now so he can actually fight back. A few moments later, the radio says that the file is sent and Tony gives a blast, shooting Flint's head off. Across the field, Captain America bashes Norman, telling him to just give it up. But after pushing him back, Norman shouts, where is Nick Fury? I'll kill him right here. And as he yells, he suddenly hears Harry's voice call out, Dad! Norman turns around and Harry stands there, telling him that he needs to stop. Norman stops and he stands up, saying, Nick has sunk to a new low using my own child. And Harry tells him no, he came on his own, so please just stop all of this. While they talk, Tony watches and tells the helicarrier to go ahead. Load Osborn's genetic sequence, he has a clear shot. Harry then looks back at the White House and sees Peter. Norman stands still and then slowly begins to revert back, when suddenly there's a flash and a bright blue blast hits Norman in the back. And as he falls, he shouts, I'll kill you all! Everyone on the ground begins to focus their attacks on Norman, and Nick walks up to Harry and tells him this wasn't a part of the plan. Peter rushes down to see Harry, and then there's another explosion in the sky. Everyone looks up to see a giant ball of electricity and then a person fall from it. One of the soldiers asks who just won, and as him and Tony aim, they see Thor float back to the ground, asking if they're done yet. Peter turns back to Harry, hugging him, telling him that he didn't deserve any of this, and through his sobs, Harry says, all of you, I'll kill all of you for this. Another soldier starts to walk Harry away, and Nick walks up to Peter, telling him that for a number of reasons, he needs to get out of here. They will get him back to New York within the hour. They've got Harry under control. A little while later, Peter heads over to the helicarrier and is told to tell Aunt May that he was also being held. Because of security, he was kept separate from her. She asks if she's mad or anything, like on a scale of 1 to 10. As Peter and the agent walk into the next room, May screams that she will sue all of them if she doesn't see her nephew right now, right this instant. Peter runs over to hug her and she tells the agents that she would very much like them to bring her home now. Elsewhere in another lab loading bay, a cryogenic chamber is activated with the body of Norman Osborn. Captain America says they should just put a bullet in the back of his head, and Nick tells them that they can't, not until they get everything they need from his DNA. As the rain pours down, Captain America tells him that's right, because the next war will be a genetic one. And Nick Fury tells him, yeah, that's right. And that concludes Volume 9 and the Sinister Six Arrival into the Ultimate Universe. The Ultimate Universe is getting better and better, and honestly, we're about to cross into what I consider to be the best storylines in the Ultimate Spider-Man storyline series. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel to get your Saturday Ultimate Spider-Mans, and you can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram to follow more about what's happening on this channel.